two, one. Obi tries real. Hello, guys. Welcome to another live stream of Visa Franchise. I was going in there with an Eminem song. Uh,
Yes, very popular one
Hold
too.
on a minute. I'm reverbing. All right, so that's gone. Cool. Joaquin Rosales, Aramburu, thank you for joining.
Hey, Alaattin, how you
Um,
doing? It's been a long time. Good to see you.
Doing all right. Thank you so much. It's one of those days we're here trying to address the questions of our clients, trying to, shed some light on some of the issues and some certain things that people want to know. And today's topic happens to be, you know, heavily related to change of status, heavily related to, coming in here, dealing with USCIS instead of dealing with consular processing. We'll be talking about some of the common pitfalls, some of the mistakes, things to do, things not to do. But obviously, we do have a rundown. We would love you, our audience, to send in your questions in the comment section. We would love to address that. Miqueas Hernandez, welcome. Thanks for joining the live. And if each and every one of you can give the live stream a like, it would help promote it, and we would have more people joining in. Cool. That's being said, let's start. Let's start with the obvious question. I get to talk to a lot of prospects, Joaquin, and people have this idea of coming to the U.S. and starting entire process inside the U.S. with a B1, B2 visa and changing status to E2 or whichever visa that they're targeting would be easier, hassle-free, faster, as opposed to the consular processing. That's the narrative. That's the common understanding that we're going to lay right into. But to kick things off, at the very beginning, B1, B2, what does it allow you to do? Because I hear this question a lot. People are asking, all right, Alain, I understand I'm going to come to the US, but B1, B2 is a tourist visa. Now they're buying a business, hiring people, maybe even running it for some time until I get my visa. Would I be breaching the contract? I mean, what is it? What is allowed and what is not allowed?
I'm glad you phrased it like that. You said B1, B2, I have a tourist visa. And that's like a very common mistake. And I know that me and you have talked about this, but it flows like that, right? A lot of people just say, oh, yeah, I have a tourist visa. But usually they have a B1 and B2. So we have to make sure that we separate them both, right? B1, focus primarily, obviously, this is the United States of America. We love business and we like money, right? So B1, business. It's for business, but don't get confused. That doesn't mean that it allows you to work here. You need a work authorization or a visa that allows you, right, to work here because that's the purpose of the visa. But there's two separate things between working here without a work authorization and doing business here, right? Which is doing business. You can close contracts. You can talk to providers. You can talk to potential clients. I don't know, all sorts of things that are business related, but you're not actually working and getting paid by, say, an employer for work that you're doing inside of the United States. So that's the B1 part of it. And then the B2 is for tourist reasons, medical affairs reasons, etc. Right? So a lot of people say I have a tourist visa when in actuality they have both of them, right? So they have the ability to come in and progress in some sort of business endeavors that they may have, right? So long as they're not working, and they can do so perfectly legally without a problem. So it's good to define that initially, right? B1,
Yeah.
B2, what it is, right?
So you touched upon a good point. As long as they're not working. So let's build a scenario, right? Suppose that I came here, B1, B2, and I said in the very beginning at the border that I'm coming in here to travel. So they registered my entry on B2. Oh, this guy is here for tourists. And then I change my mind, and now I'm looking at businesses, and now I'm engaging in, business related activities. Would I still be violating the visa?
Not in particular. If you have the B1 and B2, you were given that. So it doesn't really apply in terms of when you come in and you're saying, what am I going to do? Right. It's more of when you were given the visa at the consulate. Right. So what was the intention? Right. Well, I'm going to potentially do some tourist stuff. I like to go into Disney, but at the same time, I don't know. I have, products that I sell back in my home country, and I have my providers are in the United States. So I'm going to stop by and say hi to them, whatever, shake hands, kiss babies, whatever it may be, right. To foment that relationship and have a better, growth in my business. That's totally fine, totally legal. So when you are getting that stamped on your passport, that's what matters, right? What is it that you told, right, that agent at the embassy that you were going to be doing over here, and that's why you were given that visa? So perhaps you enter it and you say on that particular time, yeah, I'm going to do some tourism, but guess what? You got a call from your provider, and you say, hey, I'm also in Orlando. I'm going to be in Disney too.
Right.
You're go there. You're going to talk to him, or her, and you're going to sit down and talk business, do business perfectly. There's no problem with that, right?
Okay.
The issue comes when, and I think we're going to dive more in depth into this topic, is whether or not you have a preconceived intention, right, of doing something else than what you're claiming when you went to your embassy appointment and you said that you were going to do either tourism or business stuff in here, right? And not say, stay here and do something else. Now, the United States government, USCIS, immigration laws overall basically have what it's called this 90-day rule, right? It's actually more from the Department of State. It's not from USCIS. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to ask me about something,
No,
before I think start running into this.
No. It's. I appreciate that. I guess what I was trying to ask, what I was trying to make it clarify was the class of admission.
Yeah.
What happens when you're admitted as B2 and maybe things change? Would that create a problem? So that was.
I don't think. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah. Once again, I mean, whatever you were issued at the beginning, right? If it's very seldom that you see cases where they just give you either a B1 or a B2, right? Although it happens, right? Usually they give you both of them. So I mean, they're interchangeable. So I don't see an issue. And then how are they going to really know that, right? So cool. So it's not really an issue, I don't think.
Cool. Let's go ahead addressing some of the questions.
Sure.
And we'll come back into our rundown. Maquias Hernandez asks the question: if I come on a B1 visa, I am now exploring the E2 option. How soon do I need to start the process before my current stay expires?
Perfect. Thank you, Maquias. Now I don't have to run over Alaattin and then just keep talking. You already asked what I wanted to talk about. So that's a great question. So once again, we go back to what I was originally explaining here with my friend Alaattin. What you preconceived intention was when you were at the embassy and you got the B1 or B2, B1, B2 visa is what matters. So if at that time your intention was to come in here as a tourist, go to Disney, or as a businessman, go see one of your providers, potential clients, whatever it may be, that's totally fine. That was your preconceived intent. That was your intention from the beginning. Now you're here, right? And then after being here for some time, and this is what it's called, the so-called 90-day rule, right? Immigration basically allows and understands that things change, right? So you just said right now, I came in on a B1 visa and I'm exploring the E2 option, right? So that's exactly what happens. Life happens. So they understand that. So after 90 days, then essentially you're not waving kind of like a red flag in the sense that, if you had told already a consular officer that you're going to come in here for tourism or business purposes, right? And you walk into the United States, come into the United States, and then within a month or a week, you're already applying for an E2. Hey, hold up a minute. You just told us that you were coming in here to be a tourist or to do some, to business dealings, and now all of a sudden you want to do a different visa, then perhaps you were misrepresenting, right, at the interview what you were truly wanting to do from the beginning. So that's why the 90-day rule is very important, because after the 90-day rule, then there's sort of like an overall understanding that, hey, life happens, opportunities arise, and then just like you have found opportunities where you're now exploring ways in which you can stay here legally and expand, begin your business here in the United States. So that's a really good question, and I'm glad that you asked it.
All right. Thank you for that, Joaquin. David Sean said, my question is, can I include my spouse and kids in the E2 visa if I apply while still in US on a tourist visa? Thank you. It's a very important question.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important, though. Once again, this all comes back to preconceived intent. So a lot of people say, oh, well, 90-day rule, or, I wasn't intentionally coming in, with the idea of applying for an E2 visa, but, this opportunity came across. We consulted with, with a special team that knows what they're doing, like Visa Franchise. And then all of a sudden there's opportunities. So great, 90 days have passed. There's a process that needs to be had. I'm going to put in my kids, for example, in school. That's a huge mistake. And a lot of people don't know about this. When you're enrolling your kids in school while you're in a B1, B2, that's a big no-no for immigration. Now, once you're given that E2 visa, there's no problem. And to answer your question, David, yes, you can do so. You can include your spouse and your kids in your E2 visa while applying in here. It's called change of status. Okay? You can do so. But what I'm trying to get across is there's a lot of mistakes that are done by people who are not basically being supported by the right team, right? And they make these pretty bad mistakes that if they come out in light, you're going to be in a really tough position in front of immigration. But to answer your question, yes, you can. Absolutely. The family nucleus to the United States and to the immigration laws of this country is extremely important. So, spouse and children under 21, pretty much every single visa that I know of includes spouses and children under 21, whether you outside or inside.
Cool. Thank you very much, Joaquin. Another question. So some people don't have B1, B2, yet they can still travel to the US. They have ESTAs. They have, there may be citizens of countries where they don't need a visa to travel to the US. How does the situation look for them? Are they, for example, ESTA, are they, is it permissible to engage in business-related activities? Maybe countries with no visa requirement?
Yeah, all right. So for ESTA is a little bit different. And ESTA, as you know, it's basically a visa waiver, right? It's certain countries that the United States feels comfortable with, right? And they think, most citizens from those countries are not going to just stay here, and they can just come in and they don't have to go through the entire process of getting a tourist or business visa, B1, B2 at the consulate, right? You come in, stay for 90 days, come out, no problem, right? But for ESTA, there's some caveats, and you can do, which is very interesting. So you can do adjustment of status. And to clarify to our audience, there's a difference between changing status and adjusting status. So I want everybody to remember, adjusting, right, means you are adjusting into a residency. That's the only way that you're going to utilize that word. You adjust to become a resident. That's it. You're changing status from one visa, it may be a B1, B2, to perhaps another non-immigrant visa, which is basically, let's say, E2, L1, whatever it may be, right? But the interesting thing is that with an ESTA, let's say you come into the United States, or you've already you already got married, prior to coming in, and then, or you come in here and you fall in love, and then you fall in love with the love of your life, and then all of a sudden life has changed and you want to stay here with the love of your life to whom you married, and then now you can actually do a change of status. You can do that with an ESTA. Interestingly, you can't do a change of status. So other types of visas like the E2 when you are under an ESTA, right? The scrutiny is way higher, and most likely you're going to run into some problems in there. But in general, right? I think you mentioned Canadians and stuff like that, right? They have the ability to come in here into the United States. The authorities are more lenient, so typically, actually, that doesn't really apply for Canadians. What I just said about changing the status, so a Canadian could come in here, with a B1 and they're more flexible, basically, is what I'm saying with Canadians.
Yeah.
So it's important to note that, but yeah, like you said, there's differences, and it's really important that you have the correct assessment. You don't want to be in a situation where they see you as trying to game the system. That's a really bad position to be in. So it's better to have the right team to give you the right advice.
All right. Very well. So just to run over this quickly, it's that B1, B2, ESTA or no visa. The intention is to get E2 visa, but the potential applicant needs to come here and see the business opportunity or the franchise opportunity and engage in those business related activities. Until what point is it permissible? So, for example, I can lease a place, yeah, register a company, hire people, buy inventory, move in money, maybe open up a bank account. And at what point do I need the visa? Can I sit on the table and start managing my business, knowing that, oh, look, a month from now, I'll get the visa. But for the time being, I'm the sole owner. Yes, I have an employee or two, but there's a lot of business related items that I need to take care of. I'm not paying myself, but I'm actively for the past 2-3 weeks managing this business until I get my visa. Is that sort of a gray area, or is that not permissible at all? Where's the red line?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and it's kind of a gray area. Look, the letter of the law, and if you're going to get a person or an adjudicator, an agent that's going to really look into your application, and all of a sudden it's finding out that you're taking on roles of management, right? Even though, quote unquote, you're not paying yourself, and perhaps you're not paying yourself because you know that you're not allowed to work and get paid, but you're still working, right? So it's kind of like you're working around the system. That probably doesn't look good. Once again, I mean, it'll be kind of tough to figure that out unless you outright say it in your application, in your petition, right? But where's the red line? I mean, it really comes down to whether or not you're working and you're getting paid. And I know that you just said, "What if I'm not getting paid?" It's just, look, it's a logical thing, right? So look, all right, I'm not getting paid, but you're working, right? Like you're gearing towards that. So if they find out, which once again, like it's difficult unless you're actually like say it in your application, but you don't want to be in a position where you get questioned about it, right?
Yeah.
So once again, you want to have the right advice. You want to do things right and appropriately. And you can do a lot of things, that will get your business to pretty much operational, if not operational. And perhaps you have someone else who's, running it, and you might be sort of, giving some sort of advice, right? But you're not actively managing it, right? If we want to be perfectly 100% transparent with immigration, right? And then there's no issue there, right? So you can, like you said, lease places, you can open up bank accounts, talk to clientele, providers, inventory, whatever it may be. All those things are things that are part of the process of opening up a business. But there's a difference in between that and sort of actively working, managing, getting paid, etc. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thomas Jameson asked a question. By the way, guys, if you're watching it, please send in your question. We would love this. This is what we're here for. We've dedicated this particular time for you guys. Please send in your questions as much as possible. We would really love to address them. We do have a rundown that we want to go through, but so long as the questions are coming, we're happy to address them. So a little bit of an encouragement, but you got to be paying your dues. You should give the video a like. If you want your question to be answered, you need to give the video a like.
No like, no answer.
Yes, no like, no answer. So Thomas, go ahead and do that, and let's answer your question. Can I partner with someone in the US who is a citizen and still qualify for the E2 visa?
Yes, absolutely you can. So for the E2 visa, the only thing that you need to understand, Thomas, is that you must be in control of the business, right? What does that mean? You have to own and have operational control of at least 50% of the business. For attorneys like myself, if you want to make my life easier, right, our lives easier here, own 51%, but it doesn't matter. You can own 50% so long as it's pretty clear that you have total control, operational control of the business. It's fine. And to answer your question, then you can partner it up, obviously, with a U.S. citizen. Could be 49-51, even 50-50 if you like, but you have to have 50% and control of the operation, and you'll be fine. So there's absolutely no issue with that. I've seen it a ton of times.
Sure. Thank you. Sukai Monday, can I ask a question? Of course you can ask a question. You don't even need to.
You gotta give the like though.
Yeah, you got to give the like. Give the like, and start sending the question.
Ask the question.
Yes, we'll happy to address that. Going back to our rundown, Joaquin. Now let's talk about change of status and how does that work, and what are the advantages of it? Who should do it? Who shouldn't do it? And let's talk about the advantage in terms of premium processing as opposed to consular processing. So change of status. What is it? What is not? Who is it for?
Focusing on the E2, no?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, you can talk about it in general, but
right.
E2 or E2 related visas or visas close to the E2.
So for the E2, change of status is permissible. We already went over, 90-day rule and all that, and who can do it, who can, under what type of visas. You got to have a status, right? That's what's called change of status. So you have to have your status when you're trying to do this change, and then the way you do it is that you apply. There's a form called the I-129, and then you do so, and then you have the ability, unlike in the consulate, right? You have the ability to pay for what is called premium processing. So that means that you pay the government an extra fee, and then they revise your application and they give you an answer in 15 business days, right? This is a very important tool because a lot of the people who come in, for example, in a B1, B2, and then all of a sudden they realize, after a month or 2 or 3 months or whatever, that there's some opportunities. There might be some franchises that I'm interested in. There might be some business opportunities that I'm interested in, and I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to begin a business here in the United States. Then you came in under a visa. They typically give you a visa for 6 months under B1, B2, right? That's the usual. So you have to basically have everything adjudicated prior to that because you don't want to be out of status. So if they give you 6 months and you stay longer than 6 months, then that's not good. It doesn't look good. That means that you're outside of the status time that they gave you. So it's not a good thing. So you want to do this within those 6 months. And obviously, I'm sure the follow-up question is, but what can you tell me right now that I got to wait? Not that I got to wait, because that means that you had a preconceived intent. But I realized after I got in here to the United States, right, that there was opportunity. And even though initially I wanted to come in here as a tourist, now I'm interested in perhaps being a business person in here. Okay, fine. We're in day 80. We got to wait 90 days, but that means I only have 3 months. How can we do this? Well, you do it through premium processing. You have to do it through premium processing, because if you do it the regular route, it's probably not going to be enough time for you to get a response back from the authorities inside of the United States and the clock that you have ticking on the visa that you came in with. So if you don't do premium processing, you're risking that, your attorney is going to say essentially, hey, you got to go Doesn't mean that you can't finish a process, but you lost the money that you spent on the initial form. You're just going to have to do essentially, basically, consulate processing. You got to have to just do it from your country. So it's very important that you do, depending on the visas. I mean, some people coming in here and they have a student visa, and the visa is for way longer than 6 months, right? So that perhaps is not a problem. But usually, if you want to do a change of status for E2, I highly suggest to do premium processing. You get an answer in 15 business days, and then you get to stay here with your family.
Cool. We have a question from Mario. Mario said, I have a call booked with your team, but I will ask one of the questions here. Can I start and operate a business in the US from abroad, from Canada, for less than the recommended 100K? Well, let me just start answering this and then throw the ball at you, Joaquin. The answer is yes, absolutely. We actually covered this in one of the videos. Is it possible to get an E2 visa with a $15,000 of investments? And the answer turns out to be yes. There's no specified amount or what that substantial amount looks like for that particular business. There's a common consensus in the immigration community that 6 figures, like $100,000 and above, looks substantial for pretty much any business or any startup. The reason for that is that we got to remember the visa officers are not experts in your industry. They're not experts. They're not business consultants. They may not necessarily know your particular business, but showing that 6 figures and 100K looks beefy, but it is not necessarily the case for everyone. I mean, we're comfortable. For most applicants in Canada, $70,000 to $80,000. We see that do the trick. Some cases $50,000 is doable, depending on what the business is and whether you have a background for it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joaquin, but when you're submitting a very strong background, say, for example, you've been active in one particular industry in Canada, now you are wanting to, open up a branch here in the United States, move your business over here, but, you've been well known in what you're doing and very successful. The investment amount may not necessarily be as important as you're bringing in a lot of expertise and a lot of experience to position you for success. So to answer this question, I'd say absolutely. I mean, 100K is not necessarily a requirement, but anything else you want to add to it, Joaquin?
I agree with pretty much everything that you said. What is substantial investment, especially if you're coming from Canada? As we said, they tend to be a little bit more lenient with Canadians. But in general, it depends on the business, right? And to answer your question that you asked, whether or not there's a sort of a positive influence on the application adjudication, the adjudication of your application, because you're doing basically a business that you have been doing for a very long time, right, in your home country. Yes, that actually gives you, bonus points, because although the focus is on the investment and potentially projecting or already having American or resident employees, right? They also want to know if you're going to be able to run this business, right? And just to clarify, there's a lot of people who are professionals, doctors, engineers, lawyers, whatever it may be, that they want to be entrepreneurs, and just because they have focused their entire lives on these industries, it doesn't mean that they are not competent to buy a franchise and come to the United States and run it, right? Tons of them have been approved. But if on top of that, you have been doing this for a while back in your country, well, that gives the officer even more confidence that you have a higher likelihood of being successful, which means more tax dollars in revenue, more employment in the United States, stimulating the economy, which is pretty much the essence of the E2 visa.
Cool. Hope that answers your question, Mario. Then get it off the ground again from abroad, then prove that it's operating and hiring Americans, then apply for the E2 with that business.
I think we answered pretty much everything right there.
Yeah, I think that's it's a continuation of the same question. I think.
Yeah, it's the same question. Yeah, it's the same question.
All right, cool. All right. Yeah, all right. Thanks for the questions, guys. Let's go back to the tail of the tape. It's very important. We're gonna talk about the risks of that are involved with the USCIS or State Department here changing its status as opposed to consular processing. Could there be a case, Joaquin, where say I came into the country with B1, B2, invested my money, adjusted my status, scheduled a consular interview, and I've been doing and operating this business for a year, no problems. Now it's time for me to go to consulate and get the visa stamped on my passport after an interview. Could I get denied? What are the chances of that happening?
It's interesting that you bring this up because I think I can start talking about a topic that's really important. It needs to be mentioned if you're thinking about doing, say, change of status, specifically for the E2 visa, and that is that when you're doing a change of status, you're essentially applying for this visa, but you're not getting a visa stamp on your passport. Okay, you're getting a proof for the visa. I know this is a little complex and counterintuitive, but it's just how immigration works. Don't blame me. Blame the Congress people that pass the laws. But essentially, when you do a change of status, right, you have been approved for the visa, but you don't have the visa stamped on your passport. What does that mean? So that means that you will get 2 years, right? But then if you want to or have to leave the country, you have to go through your consulate or a different consulate. It doesn't always have to be your country's consulate, by the way. There's consulates around the world that take third country nationals, is what it's called. And you have to go basically and then get that stamp in your passport. And yes, there could be a possibility, and this is why it's important that you team up with the right company and team that can help you go through this process, right? And then essentially be prepared for that interview, demonstrate that you have been doing what you said you were going to be doing with this business when you submitted the application inside of the United States, that the business is running in the manner in which you described when you submitted the application inside of the United States, and that it's looking good and it's looking optimistic and it's already giving good signs that it's going to work out or it's already working out, etc. So you have to be prepared for that. And it's really important that you know that you cannot come back in. If you leave, you have to go to the embassy. You have to get that stamp on your passport. If you come back, they're not going to let you in. All right. So it's really important that the people know that.
Cool. How about the risks? Can I be denied at the consulate?
I mean, yes, there's a possibility. Yes, but
what would be the basis of that?
Maybe the business is not running too well. Maybe perhaps they think that the amount of money that you have invested, it wasn't substantial, and whoever saw it, your application inside of the United States didn't do a good determination. Maybe they think that it's marginal, which means that you're just making enough money to sort of feed your family and have a life in the United States. That's not the purpose of the visa. Yeah, you can say, look, it's fine. We're green. We're not in red. The business is running, but they can say, well, yeah, but you only are making enough in order to basically provide for your family. The purpose of this visa is to invest in the United States, right? And also employ United States citizens or residents or whoever has a work permit and can work legally here in the United States. So that's a possibility. Obviously, once again, my people, if you're with the correct team, that should be avoided, right? And you'll be in a much better position in order to avoid that situation. So yeah, by all means,
All right.
choose carefully.
Cool. Okay. Well, we pretty much went through the rundown. I mean, guys, please keep your questions coming. We still got about 9 minutes that we can keep it going, and we can answer your questions. So if you have them, please shoot them in. We'd be happy to address those. But apart from that, our rundown is complete. In order to summarize, Joaquin, what would an optimal scenario look like for someone who is going to go through this process this particular way?
Plan ahead, right? I mean, I keep repeating the same thing, but it's the truth. I mean, a lot of people think they can do their own applications and all that. I mean, this is a reason why there's competent teams out here who can do this, right? With the right support. You have to plan ahead. So if you want to do a change of status, that's fine. It's perfectly fine. So long as you understand that at some point down the line, right, either you're going to have to extend that status right here in the United States, which means that you can't leave, right? Or you have to plan accordingly and then, go through the process of having an interview at the consulate, right? So I think planning ahead, right, having a good sort of structure and understanding of what you're able and not able to do is a good basis, and you have a team that supports you throughout the entire process. That's key.
Cool. Here's one question, Mario. We did address this particular question, but for the purposes of maybe viewers joining in later, would like to address this question again. It says, always kind of confused about the timing of starting a business and applying for an E2. In one hand, you have to start the business to be eligible, but you can't operate the business without the E2. Conflicting situation, no? Kind of went through it, but Joaquin, please, if you want to go through it again, it would be amazing.
Yeah, well, as we discussed prior, I understand frustration. It is, yes, it's frustrating when you look at it that way. And all the people say, well, look, I'm investing all this money. What if I get denied? Well, do I lose the money? And I always tell them, well, you can apply again, right? So yes, it's frustrating, right? When you look at it that way. And remember, unlike other visas, I mean, this is an investment visa. So if you're comparing it to a lot, then there's dozens of visas out there, right? This is one of the visas that they tend to like more, because in the end they want your money to come here and be invested in the United States and for you to employ people, right? But going back to your question, if you have a visa that allows you to do all the things that can lead you to having an almost operational business, or operational without you being sort of involved on the day-to-day operations while your visa is being adjudicated, then that's totally fine. There's no problem, right? So, I mean, it just goes back to strategy, and it goes back to whether or not you're prepared, and how you have a plan with the appropriate team that's going to support you to execute that plan in a manner in which you have a much higher possibility of getting approved, while you're also are able to basically build up your business and having it being almost operational without violating any laws.
Okay. All right. Cool. Joaquin, thank you very much for your time. Mario, I hope that's the answer to the question. And Sukai Monday asked, what is the process for US B2 visa for Nigerians? Do you have any assistance to that process? We really don't. We don't assist in B1, B2. We are a firm that specializes on, the business and immigration end of things. We don't really focus on the B1, B2s or F1s or asylum cases, marriage-based petitions, and things of that nature. The only other area of immigration that we cover are generally merit-based or talent-based green cards, or EB1As, EB2 NIWs, EB1Cs. that are generally an extension to the first non-immigrant visa that we help our client obtain, such as E2 or L1 or O1, for that matter. So these are kind of like the areas that we cover. We can take you until the permanent residency part, but we focus only on business and immigration and people who can legally come here to the U.S. or got to be from a country of treaty. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Nigeria is not an E2 treaty country.
Yes, I believe you're correct. Yes.
All right. Okay, guys. Thank you very much for the interest and for your time. And we're going to try to do this every week. And as we're doing it, Joaquin Rosales, Aramburu, thank you very much
Thank you,
for your
sir.
time. See
Much
you guys next
appreciated.
week.
Take care.
Bye.